Hey everyone, today I'm going to give you my full review of the XP Pen Artist Pro 16TP 4K touchscreen pen display. So this video is part 2. In the first part, I've showed you the things included, talked about the design, the build quality, the physical aspect of the display, and also did some quick drawing tests. In this video, I'm going to show you what the driver can do, talk about the colors, and talk more about the drawing experience, and also tell you some of the glitches that I have discovered. So as usual with my reviews, if you want to save time, you can use the timestamps provided to jump to different sections of this video, or just check out the text review that I have written on my blog. The link to my text review is in the video description below. Let's talk about some potential deal breakers first. You may not like how the cables come out like this at the top. One is pointing to the side and one is pointing upwards. For some reason, the USB-C connector for this 2-to-1 cable is not L-shaped. I have to use this 2-in-1 cable because my MacBook Pro from 2015 does not have USB-C. And do note that this HDMI connector here is huge. So if your USB-A port, which is beside, is too close to the HDMI port, there may be a chance that you may not be able to insert this into the USB port. I do not recommend you buy this pen display to work with macOS because finger gesture is very limited with macOS as well as the drawing apps on macOS. The company actually showed me some video where they had the macOS touchpad gestures working on this pen display, but I wasn't able to get that to work, so I'm just limited to clicks, double clicks, drag and scroll. But you cannot use finger gestures like you can on the macOS trackpad. Finger gestures will not work with this graphic design and drawing apps on macOS. This is best paired with Windows, so I'm going to disconnect this and connect this to my Windows laptop. This Windows laptop thankfully has USB-C, so I can use the USB-C to USB-C cable here. So this looks better. Another potential deal breaker is if you work with dual displays, you need a shortcut basically to move the cursor from one screen to the other, and there are no physical buttons here. The only shortcut button you can customize to switch the cursor is this single button on the pen, and if you set that shortcut to switch display here, then you won't have another button for your right click. Regarding the problem with switch display, I would like to have a right click here, so I've tried to assign switch display to one of these shortcut buttons here on the XP Pen AC19 shortcut remote. By the way, the driver for this remote is the same driver for the pen display. Unfortunately, switch display just doesn't work even when assigned to this shortcut remote. XP Pen knows about this problem, so hopefully they can release a driver update to allow for switch display to actually work here, or maybe allow you to customize some specific keyboard shortcut just to allow you to switch display, so that you can still use this click here as a right click. Let's talk more about the design and physical aspect. So you have to use two cables if you want to drive the pen display at 100% brightness. If you're just using the single cable that's connected to your computer, the maximum brightness you can get is just 50%. If you can work with that, then you can just use one cable, but if you need the brightness to be higher, connect the other cable to a power source. This pen display looks really nice. It's a very clean and simple design with rounded corners, solid build quality. The look and feel is really premium. Out of the box, the colors look fantastic. Using a Spider 5 Pro color calibrator, I've measured color support for 98% sRGB, 84% NTSC, 90% Adobe RGB, 87% P3. So anything above 90% Adobe RGB is really good color accuracy. So this is definitely something that is good enough for graphic design work for people who need color accuracy. The maximum brightness I've measured is up to 262 nits, and as you can see, finger gestures work really well and it's very responsive. So from this angle you can see the colors, they look good. So this pen display actually has pretty good viewing angles. The downside is the display is quite reflective, and this surface is considered smooth. It does not have the matte textured surface that digital artists prefer. The pen glides around very smoothly. For digital artists or for creating digital art, I believe many artists would prefer the tactile experience when drawing on a textured surface. It makes you feel like you're drawing on paper, but here, this display, it's very smooth, so it's going to take some time to get used to. This is how it sounds when drawing on the surface. And this is how it sounds like on a pen display with a textured surface using the same pen as earlier. The drawing experience is definitely better on a matte textured drawing surface, but there are some compromises with matte textured surface as well. So matte textured surface, regardless of whether it's matte glass or a matte screen protector, they will introduce color noise. This is the image quality of a matte textured pen display, and this is how the anti-glare handles reflections. There is color noise. I'm not sure if you can see it from this video, but it's definitely there. Personally for me, the color noise is not a big deal. The colors still look fantastic and the image quality still looks really sharp. And this is the glossier surface of the XP Pen pen display, and this is how the anti-glare handles reflections. Here you can actually see the window grills more clearly, while earlier with the anti-glare on the matte surface, everything is just a white haze. There is no color noise here, so the image quality here is definitely better. There was a recent comment on my other video, and the person was saying how he or she cannot stand the color noise. So there are people who cannot stand color noise. So there is definitely compromise. Do you want to have better image quality, in which case you have to use a more glossy display and you won't have the tactile drawing experience? Or do you want to have a more tactile drawing experience, in which case you have to use a matte textured drawing surface, which will affect image quality? 4K resolution on a 16-inch, or in this case 15.6-inch pen display is a fantastic combination. So all the visuals, they look really sharp. User interface elements like the menus, the icons, basically everything will look very sharp and detailed. There is no noticeable pixelation. By the way, the scaling I'm using here is 200%. So this will give me the 1080p scaling, but retains the sharpness of 4K. This means that the text, the icons, the brushes, everything will look big enough for your eyes to see and click accurately. Now this display is laminated, which means there is no gap between the drawing surface and the LCD beneath. This means there is no parallax. The cursor or the line will always appear directly beneath the pen tip. There is no gap between the pen tip and the line that you create beneath. So when you're drawing, it really feels like you're drawing like on the surface of the canvas, if you know what I mean. Palm rejection works reasonably well. For apps that only allow pen input for drawing, you will get perfect palm rejection. For example, with Clip Studio Paint, when you try to draw with your finger or when you rest your palm on the display, nothing will happen, but you can still use finger gestures to zoom in and out, rotate, pan, and zoom. With Clip Studio Paint, for some reason, I feel like finger gestures, they don't work instantly. There is this split-second lag when you try to zoom in and out. It's not as responsive compared to other drawing apps I've tested, but still responsive enough. This app that I'm using is Concepts, which is an app designed for Windows tablet, and here the finger gestures very responsive. One thing about this touch screen pen display is this allows you to use all those apps that were designed for use on Windows tablets. So Concepts is one example. There are other apps such as Sketchable, Autodesk Sketchbooks. Those apps are designed with finger gestures in mind. So this app, if you were to use it with keyboard and mouse or with a pen display that does not have a touch screen, it's going to be very difficult because it's difficult to navigate the canvas without the finger gestures. But now with the touch screen, you can actually use this app as how it should be used. And this happens to be one of my favorite drawing apps on Windows, Android, and iPad OS. Drawing with finger gesture support is very intuitive. If you have been drawing on tablets, well, now with this pen display, you can actually use desktop software. The main difference between drawing on this versus on a Windows tablet like a Microsoft Surface Pro is here you get a much larger display to draw on, and this 15.6-inch surface area is a very comfortable size to work with. Time for some line quality test. Initial activation force of this pen is low, but somehow I feel like when it comes to drawing really thin lines, it's not easy. So for example, when I start with a thin line and I press down hard to make it thick, when I try to go back to the thin line again, it's not easy. Let's try again. So what I'm trying to do here is to create the thinnest and thicker line using just one single brush, and it's not easy. So the line variation here is not as good compared to other pens. The lines taper all right here. Now this is Clip Studio Paint, so the drawing performance is actually pretty good. This is Medibank Paint Pro. Again, not easy to get those really thin lines. And also when you're drawing with very minimal pressure, it seems like there is some wobble, but it's not like a big issue or anything. This is my normal drawing speed. Yep, it seems fine here. But if I want to draw thinner lines, it's actually easier for me to just reduce the brush size here. Notice the stray strokes here. The desktop version of Medibank Paint Pro does not have palm rejection. It still supports finger gestures, but it does not have palm rejection. If you really want to use drawing apps that do not support palm rejection, you can actually turn off the touch screen using this button here. So this will allow you to draw, but since the touch screen is now off, you won't be able to use finger gestures, but then you won't have straight strokes. So that's the compromise here. This is Kritar, and tilt sensitivity works fine here, but tilt doesn't work when the pen is about 1 inch away from the edge. This may or may not be a problem depending on whether or not you really draw to the edge. So if you draw like 1 inch away, it still works. But if you draw too close to the edge, tilt doesn't work. I have some issues with Photoshop, both on Windows and Mac OS. With Photoshop, for some reason, the brush strokes, they taper quite abruptly, and at the end of the stroke, there is this tail here. So if you choose a thinner brush, the tail is not as obvious, but if you choose like a thicker brush, you can see this tail, it's very obvious, and the brush just cannot taper that smoothly for some reason. The brush you choose will also affect the stroke, so that's the standard hard brush earlier. So now I'm going to use the Carl Ultimate Inking Thick. This brush doesn't taper with the tail, but this brush still tapers quite abruptly, but at least it doesn't have that very distracting tail. So let's draw some quick strokes here. Yep, so you don't see that tail here, and it tapers a bit smoother compared to the standard hard brush here. And now let me show you what you can do with the driver and OSD. If you find this section boring, you can just fast forward to the end. So the most important thing under work area is if for some reason the cursor is not appearing directly beneath the pen tip, then you will have to calibrate the pen display to make sure that there is no cursor and pen tip misalignment. Under pen settings, this is where you can customize the single side button here. Having only a single button here is a downside because if you are using multiple displays, there is actually no other way for you to switch the cursor from one display to the other. There are no physical shortcut buttons on this pen display, so if you are using, for example, a laptop on the side here and you want to switch the cursor to the laptop screen, you will have to set switch display to this single button here, and you have to find some other way to right click. Pressure sensitivity can be adjusted by moving these 3 control points. Now adjusting the pressure curve here will allow you to draw thinner lines more easily. The earlier line tests that I showed you, those were drawn with this curve, basically a straight line. Adjusting the pressure curve here will not fix the problem with the tapering Photoshop brush strokes. Now with the Windows driver, there is this additional Windows Ink functionality compared to the macOS driver. So if pressure sensitivity is not working as expected, you may have to toggle this on or off to troubleshoot. The 3 buttons here at the top left are for the OSD, so when there is no menu, these 2 buttons are used to adjust the brightness. So this is the OSD. You can change the screen mode. You can use the 2 buttons here to navigate. So here you can change the brightness, contrast, dynamic contrast ratio, hue, saturation, black value, sharpness. Here you can change the color temperature. You can also change the color support for sRGB or Adobe RGB. So this pen display has been on for a few hours and it feels slightly warm here at the top, but it's not like hot until you can't rest your hand. So this is definitely something I can use to draw on for long periods of time. Alright, to conclude, let me just run through the pros and cons very quickly by reading you the list of pros and cons I've written on my website, just so that I don't miss out anything. So let's start with the pros first. This is a nice looking pen display. The build quality is solid. The 4K resolution makes everything look really sharp, but that comes at a price. This is priced at $899 US, so that to me is a bit pricey. If you have a limited budget, you don't have to get 4K, you can get the 16-inch 1080p pen display from them. Or if you do have the budget, but you want like the best value for money, I would actually recommend you to check out the XP Pen Artist 24 Pro as well. That has 1440p resolution, so you're going to see some pixelation, but 1440p resolution is actually more productive compared to 1080p. Even though this has 4K resolution, you have to scale this up at 200% to get the 1080p UI scaling. So 1080p UI is not as productive compared to 1440p, because with 1440p you can see more of your canvas, you can put like a lot more palettes on the side here. But the compromise is you have to see some pixelation. Right, oh, okay, like what happened here? Okay. The touch screen is very useful, so now the drawing process is more intuitive. If you have been drawing on tablets like this for the longest time, now you can get the same drawing experience with this pen display. And if you happen to use those drawing apps that were designed for Windows tablets, now those apps can be used as how they should be used with a touch screen user interface. I find the touch screen to be very useful when it comes to using those Windows drawing apps. This display has good color accuracy, 98% sRGB, 90% ODB RGB, good brightness, maximum brightness 262 nits from what I have measured. The pen has pretty good build quality and the pen case is really nice. Let's see, downsides. The display doesn't have a matte textured surface, so it's quite, when you're drawing, it's quite smooth. Some people may prefer the matte textured surface, but again, the downside to having a matte textured surface is there is going to be color noise. The image quality is going to be affected. So the image quality here is actually better compared to matte textured pen displays. But the compromise is you're not going to be able to get that nice tactile drawing experience. It's going to take some time to get used to. It's still very functional, obviously, for drawing. Mac OS does not support finger gestures unless you consider clicking on things as finger gestures. The pen only has one side button, so if you are using dual displays, you have to set the switch display to that side button, in which case you will lose the right click. And the driver has some issues with display switch. More specifically, if you set display switch to the pen's side button with Mac OS, there is this split-second lag before the cursor will jump to the other display. This applies to Mac OS. Anyway, you shouldn't buy this pen display if you are using Mac OS, so it doesn't really matter. The single cable can only drive the pen display at to 50% brightness. You need both cables here to drive this at or up to 100% brightness. There are some issues with drawing apps on Android. I did not show you any Android drawing tests because many of the apps that I use on Android for drawing, they don't really work that well here. Yeah. HDMI connector is too big. Yep, the HDMI connector is just too big. Could be an issue if your USB port is just beside the HDMI connector. Yeah, so that's pretty much all there is for the pros and cons. Now, in terms of the overall drawing experience and performance, it will really come down to the drawing apps that you use. So for example, as shown earlier, Photoshop has this problem with the lines tapering. When I use this pen display with Mini Bang Paint Pro, Clip Studio, they work well. Actually, this is best used with Clip Studio because with Mini Bang Paint Pro, there is no palm rejection. And if you use Krita, it's great as well. Finger gestures are supported and everything just works. If Photoshop is your main drawing app and you don't use the standard round brush, I guess you should be fine. But it really depends on what you are drawing and the type of brushes you use with Photoshop. Alright, so this is my review of the XP Pen Artist Pro 16TP 4K touchscreen pen display. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. If I have any updates to this review, I will put all the updates in the text review. And if you guys happen to be using this pen display, do share your experience in the comment section below. Oh, before you go, I just want to let you know that I will be comparing this pen display with the Huion Canvas Pro 16 4K in a separate video, which will appear on my tech channel. Yes, I have another YouTube channel that talks about tech. Basically, I want to just post art and traditional stuff on this art channel and post or move the tech reviews over to the other channel. So do subscribe to the other channel if you want to continue to see all these tech reviews. Bye!